Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA podcast. Mikey, Stafford and Rory O'Neill with you as always. Look ahead to the Allianz Football League weekend, and delighted to be joined by Eamonn Fitzmaurice and by Cahair of the Irish News. How's everybody doing today?
Very good, Mike.
Thanks a lot, Mikey.
Great to have you with us, lads. Cahair, might go to you first, I suppose. It seemed a relatively light week in terms of GAA news. Today's Smart Slitter press conference in Croke Park notwithstanding, but there was one big bit of news emanating from down, I guess, in that Mickey Moran has stepped down as Kilcool manager after leading them to the promised land. From reading the reports, this seems to have come as a bit of a surprise to the Kilcool players, and obviously they're pretty devastated because all we've kind of heard over the last couple of years is just the bond between himself and the players seems to be on another level altogether.
They adored him. They absolutely adored him. It was very unique for an outside manager to be loved the way, like if half the men in the world love their wives the way Kilcool players love Mickey Moran, it'd be a whole lot less brotherly. But like they just spoke so highly of him. And to be fair, you go back through Mickey's managerial career, and the vast majority of the Slackneil boys would have felt the same way about him. Had enormous time for him, and they would have felt, obviously, he gave them 4 years, and they would probably have felt that, had he stuck about for another couple, they might have been the team that won that All-Ireland instead of Kilcool, because I suppose those two were at each other's throats for a while. Like Mickey, to be the man in charge of the 5 of the last 6 Ulster club titles with 2 different clubs. What was his record? 54 games in the province, 48 wins, just 3 losses over the last 6 seasons. Like mad stuff for a competition as intense and as difficult to win as the Ulster Club Championship. So he has done a tremendous job in Kilcool. It came as something of a surprise. I would say it wasn't a complete shock either. To them, they would maybe have had some feeling that he had reached the promised land. Not that it was a selfish thing, but where else do you go beyond that? For him, he'll be 70 in April. It's very taxing. Mickey still lives in Maharat. The run from Maharat to Kilcool 2, 3, 4 times a week. That's a lot of driving for a man at that age, and it's just it takes a toll on anybody. And where else was there to go? What else was there to achieve? That was not just what Mickey Moran had set out to achieve, but what Kilcool had set out to achieve when they went hunting him. When he left Slackneil, they sent a delegation straight to him, and I suppose the rest is history. They got their man. They talked their man into the job, and 3 down titles, 2 Ulster titles, and an All-Ireland title. It's been just an unbelievable 3 years for him.
Yeah, Eamonn, as a man who's been at the coalface of intercounty management, and I would say not unhappily stepped away from said coalface of intercounty management, you must look at someone like Mickey. He was in the backroom team in 1993, obviously, when Derry won their only All-Ireland. Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim, Mayo brought them to an All-Ireland final, obviously. Beaten by yourselves. And then he's not throwing himself in with he does, kind of lend a hand with junior clubs and stuff here and there, but he throws himself in with these big clubs in Ulster. This isn't taking a handy a few quid for a training session midweek and going to a game. Slackneil and Kilcool are clubs with huge expectations. He's just been doing it for so long. Some people say, football is my life, but unless you're Mickey Moran, I think you might be exaggerating the point slightly.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I suppose there are those characters that are like that they just love it. They always bring something new when you're thinking of the likes of Mickey, obviously, Eamonn Ryan, Mick O'Dwyer, people like that they just have this absolute passion for the games. They love it. Everywhere they go, they seem to kind of improve them, bring something new with them. Obviously, the achievement with Kilcool is incredible, and for such an area to win the Club All-Ireland It was unbelievable for them. And, in a way for Mickey, he's gone out on top. For Kilcoo to put it back-to-back next year, I imagine would be quite challenging, going with the same management and the same group again. Whereas, strangely, as much as I'm sure they didn't want to lose him, it might actually give them something new and something fresh going into the new season. But he certainly deserved a bit of a break. And as Cahair said there, a lot of the times it's probably the driving, and that can be the bit that can become challenging after a while. That if it's on your doorstep and you're just going down the road, it's slightly different, but the travelling can become wearing. But I doubt he's finished, Mikey. I'm sure he's going to surface somewhere. He'll need to feed the habits and wean himself off it gradually.
Yeah, well, if he is done, Rory, is a hell of a way to go out, wasn't it?
Brilliant, and it's amazing, really, when you just listed it off, because that was the first thing before we started that stuck in my head, because I was there in '93 and Cork were beaten by Derry. Where I was sitting, actually, I could see him, and he had I think he had the poor fella. I think was it John Morrison that was with him for a long time as a sort of and the poor, I think John passed away. Is that right? Yeah, so I'm sure that would have been a big blow to him, because they were kind of a very good duo. Obviously, they were involved in one of the most memorable events that ever took place, which was the famous Mill on the Hill, as they call it, in Croke Park between Dublin and Mayo. And it's just, what a service. The one thing that always struck me about him, just because we would be quite familiar from this side of it, is I would say a man utterly devoid of ego. Now, you have to have an ego of some sort, because that's what makes us all get up in the morning and go about our daily business. But not the kind of fella to be patting himself on the back. Like, he would never do. Just wasn't interested in courting media, pre-match interviews, post-match interviews. He just had no interest in them. They didn't really serve any purpose.
He became a man of mystery up in Shot.
Yeah,
almost.
And he's I would imagine, a very private individual. From what I can gather, he's a very generous and a very giving fella to the GAA, and I think he will be a loss to Gaelic football, to football in Ulster. If he does decide to pack it up, it'll be a poor place for it. But I would agree with Eamonn. I definitely think you'll see him crop up somewhere else. I just think the man loves it too much and he won't be able to stay away.
Yeah. Well, best of luck to him, whatever he does decide to do. Right, as we'll get into having a look at a couple of the Division 1 games. Logic would say to start with the TV game, the top of the table clash. But as we've discussed on this podcast more than once, finishing top of the table or winning Division 1 isn't what Division 1 is all about. It's about surviving and or extending your stay. It shouldn't be as dramatic as to say surviving for a team like Dublin, Cahair, but they're going to Healy Park, a graveyard for many of the team over the years, and they need a win, because if their downtrodden neighbours Kildare manage to get a result against their old boss in Armagh, then Dublin are down with 2 games to go, which is you could talk about transition and all you want, but that's an insane turn of events.
Unthinkable just a few months ago that to be fair, Dublin need to win the game, Tyrone need to win the game as well, and I think that's a massive addition to the spectacle that we might get at the weekend, because Tyrone have done all right out of Division 2 a couple of times in the last decade, but they don't want to be there. Certainly not. It's not, it's not an enormous surprise that Tyrone are exactly where they are at the minute. I suppose there was a sense that they might start slowly after the All Ireland being late, and
it's their tradition.
Well, the team holiday and stuff as well. They weren't back until the McKenna Cup had already started by the time Tyrone came home. So, it was expected a wee bit that there might be a bit of a sluggy start. Obviously, the defections from the panel, you've had another one in the last couple of days. Lee Brennan has gone. The defection from the panel has weakened their hand slightly, and then they had a couple of injuries, and then they had the suspensions from the Armagh game, with 4 fellas missed the game, and it's just they've got no momentum into their season yet at all. So for them, this is a big one as well, and also the fact that they have beaten Dublin in league games, drawn with Dublin in league games over the last few years, but there would be a wee thing, you know, they won their All Ireland on complete merit last year, but it was Mayo and Kerry, and they didn't beat Dublin to win the All Ireland when Dublin had been their nemesis for the last decade or so. So while it didn't matter in terms of the All Ireland, there's no doubt there'll be a wee part of that in Tyrone's thinking this week. That, you know, we showed we're the best team in the country, but Dublin have been the best team in the country for the last 10 years, and we sort of nearly have to go and prove the point again here at the weekend. Nobody does siege mentality better than Tyrone. So look, the way Dublin are playing, it is a very, very difficult game. It's a massive game. It's, you know, All Ireland finals aside, it's the biggest game of Deadly Farrell's reign, like, and sets it up nicely.
It does, and Eamon, it is like a lot of the focus will be on Dublin because, you know, the story arc, etc. Tyrone have yo-yoed up and down out of Division 1, and I don't think as All-Ireland champions they would want, I would call it an indignity rather, or an inconvenience rather than a disaster for them to go down to Division 2. But if they want to stay in Division 1, they need to win this game because this is the gimme that they have left. They have Mayo at home and Kerry away in their last 2 games. So Dublin is actually the soft touch that Tyrone have left, and they need this 2 points.
They do, and it's a home game as well for the Mikey. And I suppose Cahair touched on it there. I think for them, we'll see the best of Tyrone this weekend. From, you know, when you're coming off winning an All Ireland, particularly maybe, of course, within the camp, they would have been expecting and they would have been ambitious. But this time last year, would they have felt that they were going to be All Ireland champions really and truly by the end of the season? I'm not sure they would have. They were on a journey to get there, and whether, you know, they would have felt that they got there last season, I'm not sure. So when you win an All Ireland like that, not a surprise, but they're still getting used to that. They're still finding their feet, and maybe some of the league games so far this year haven't exactly got the blood flowing. Obviously, the Armagh one, the fact it was a local game would be very important to them. But I think definitely Dublin coming to town and a chance to prove to everyone, yeah, we are the kingpins, we are the All-Ireland champions, and the team that has been so successful for so long are there as well. That's really going to get the management and the players really up for it this week. The fact that they had a weekend off last weekend as well has given them a chance to really focus on it. So I'm expecting a big performance from Tyrone, probably their best performance so far this year. So if the Dubs are going to get something out of it, they're going to have to, you know, go up a considerable number of gears from the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And Rory, for Dublin, obviously the cavalry isn't quite arriving yet, we don't think, in terms of the injured players they want to return. So, you know, it's the players that have been playing, the players who've kind of returned no wins from their first 4 games that they're going to be relying on.
And they, I mean, the problems that they have in terms of getting fluency into their play and figuring out a system and a style that's going to marry with the personnel that he has, is obviously one conundrum. I think the other problem that he has is he's got potential little weaknesses in nearly every line of the field. And when I say weaknesses, is, you know, I think there might be a little indecision of personnel, you know, in terms of team selection. There's certainly a problem in full back, and given the amount of goals and goal chances they concede. And I think there's no better team than Tyrone to go after and exploit that with the kind of firepower they have in their full forward line, in the half back line. You know, it's a little bit more settled in that, you know, he obviously has John Small, but like either side of him the last day out, Tom Lahiff and Sean McMahon, you know, that's a big change from, you know, your Jack McCaffrey's. And so like then midfield, you've a problem around the partnership for Fenton and ball winning forwards. So he's got problems kind of everywhere. It's not the greatest match for him to have to try and solve these. The fact that up to Tyrone, I don't know what way the pitch is going to be like, because it obviously took a bit of a hammering in that last match, but it's going to be a battle. Like, they're going to have to go up there. They're going to have to really show a lot of character. And I think they're going to be really up against it this weekend. Tyrone, as we know, you know, as Eamon just pointed out, they will want to lay down a marker. There's no better opportunity, I suppose, than to go after Dublin given the situation they find themselves in now. So it could be a very, very testing afternoon for Dublin on Sunday, and potentially more pressure for Desi. And that's not a job. That's not an easy job at the best of times, even when you're going well, So 5-6 would that be a 6th straight defeat?
Yeah,
in competitive football. Jeez, I don't know. You're going back a long time. The last time that happened to Dublin, so there's a lot of pressure on them this weekend. So it's going to be a really good test, and you'll get a good sense of where they are. If they end up in Division 2 by the time we get to 5:30 on Sunday, then I'd say you're going to see a lot of catcalling and the pressure heap on even more.
Yeah. Philly McMahon was doing some media yesterday for the Darkness into Light campaign, and I don't know. I get hung up on when lads just constantly talk about leadership. It's bothered me a lot in rugby for years. There's this constant harping on about the leadership group as if there's only 3 or 4 players in the team that matter, and the rest are kind of, there's a few chiefs and the rest are the Indians, And he said it's going to be interesting and exciting for someone that loves culture, development, and performance coaching like I do, to see what leaders come out of this, because we know there's leaders there. The Kieran Kilkennys, the Brian Fentons, Johnny Coopers, Mick Fitzes, all those lads are definitely leaders. Leaders are grand. They just need 15 lads to win a game of football at the moment. This idea of culture and environment and all this stuff, like that was what Dublin talked about when they won All Irelands. I think it needs to be a bit more basic now, really, myself.
I suppose they've lost us again. Any team, and I hate the idea of using the word transition for Dublin, given the resources they've had and the playing resources. But when you lose the caliber of players that they've lost over the last 3 or 4 years, there's a natural come down, and they have to. Ultimately, like, there is a leadership gap there. Probably they probably do have to replace some of the leadership that was there in that team, and that takes a wee bit of time for fellas to step out of their comfort zone and start sort of stepping up and running the show for them. But at the same time, you're looking at it, there's still enough leadership on that Dublin team to be performing better than they're performing. And some of the stuff that they've been doing, some of the stuff that their leaders have been doing, has been really, really surprising. Like some of the, you just break it down into the very basics of some of the ball they've kicked away, some of the decision making, some of the, really panicking. Like I think it was the Armagh game, they started lumping high ball, and suppose you look at other sports and you go back to Fergie's great United teams, like, and that was the one thing that they never did. They stuck to what they did right to the death. They never went to the lumping the ball into the box. Like they just put on more forwards until they got their goal. Like, and Dublin panicked. They've been panicking. They've been resorting to things that they haven't been doing, and that's the real worrying thing for them. That there's definitely a gap of leadership on the pitch because they're not doing what I presume they've been coached to be doing over the last 10 years.
And so, and Mikey, just one other point I'd like to make on it is just Tone Logue spoke about the rugbyization of hurling in terms of the language. And I think sometimes, particularly in Gaelic football, and particularly in relation to Dublin, there's almost a soccerization around management and management appointments, and that, like, all of a sudden the manager is under pressure and is he going to be sacked? And we saw this with Andy McEntee and all that. I just think that's so distasteful and just such an utter load of rubbish. Like, these people, no different to Eamonn, I'm sure, like, you probably found some tough times yourself. Like, these people are volunteers. Like, they don't need to be listening to this shite, and I just find some of that, like, he's in there, I'm sure he's not trying to do a bad job. The man is actually trying to do his best. There has been a natural fall off in terms of the quality and the success that they have been used to. That's just like that's how things work. There was a cycle.
I think the majority still think Desi is the man for the job, don't they? It's a more difficult job than anyone expected.
They do, but you do see some awful stuff, thrown out there, and rumor mills and rubbish. And I don't know. I just find all that.
Even so, there's a box of letters at home.
Eamonn, we were talking about. I was reminiscing about you gleefully getting away from the coalface. Now I'm going to transport you back there, just in your imagination. Put yourself in Desi's shoes. You're going up against the All Ireland champions in their backyard. You've got a massive target on your back. Most of the country gleefully hoping you get relegated, and Tyrone only too happy to be putting at least one of the nails in your coffin. Like, away from the psychology of it and that kind of thing, because, you know, that is important, but that's not what I'm interested in. It's like, do you just say, lads, we have to go back to the absolute basics, or do you say, lads, let's watch a video of the 2020 All-Ireland final, this is the team we are, you know, etc., etc. Like, what do you do to try and get a spark here? Because clearly there's a lack of confidence as much as anything.
Yeah, well, look, from the practical point of view, I think one thing that's played into their barrow a small bit for this weekend is that they had the 2 weeks. They've had a chance to gather themselves. They had last weekend. I think I saw Cormac Costello played for his club last weekend, so he got a game under his belt. So he might be back for some kind of minutes this weekend, and that'll give him a chance to get back. But I think, look, like you said, Mikey, it is about getting it back to basics. You go back to the Kildare game. In that game, it was a great win for Kildare, Newbridge and everything else. Dublin had 3, if not 4, very good goal chances. If they'd taken 2 of them, it's probably a different conversation we're having today about them. Are they back? Are they going to be able to back it up with another win? I think that's one thing that they have to get right. I think they got their defence a bit more right in terms of the structure against Kildare. They weren't as open and as porous possibly as they were in Croke Park, in particular against kicking teams. Healy Park won't play as fast as Croke Park either at the weekend. That might help them. I think Cahair touched on it there about the decision making, and particularly the decision making of their big players, not kicking it into the goalie's hands, putting it dead, not turning the ball over forward. They're all things that are quite easy to solve, really. And they're the things that have been, you know, surprising about their performances over the last couple of weeks. Just things that we've never seen from them. They've been doing them consistently. So if they get all of those things out of the system, they're going to be hard to beat then straight away. And the other thing that I think has put them under severe pressure the last couple of weeks is their own kick out. That for so long, that was such a huge part to their game. You know, they could go long, they could go short. If the team dropped off them, they gave it short and so on. But they've come under a lot of pressure on that. And the big thing always when you're playing the Dubs was it was very hard to build momentum against them, because when you got a score, be it a goal or a point, they almost always got their kick out away. And the way you're going to build momentum against them is get a couple of scores in a row. And that's becoming easier now. So I think, again, that's something that could have been fixed in the last couple of weeks, to go back to basics, get the movement right, get Evan Comerford nailing the kickouts, as we know he can. And if they fix those couple of things, suddenly they become a lot harder to play against again. But I think the fact they're backed into this situation, you mentioned the thing about the leaders, and what I always felt with them and the leadership that they had was that when you were playing them in championship, part of the reason they were so hard to beat was you could tie down 5 or 6 of them, but someone else would always emerge. And it wasn't the same fella every day. Connolly do it one day, Kilkenny do it the next day, Michael Darragh Macaulay do it the next day, Paul Flynn do it the next day. The younger players, the likes of Mannion, might do it another day. There was always one of them or 2 of them, when the need was greatest, stood up, because they were all leaders. And probably at the moment, with the younger players being trying to bed it in, they're not comfortable yet in their own playing roles, never mind in a kind of a role as in telling Brian Fenton, cop on, will you give me the ball properly? I want the ball here, I'm on, you're not giving it to me. They're probably not in that space yet. So I think that's probably where the leadership void is probably there a bit at the moment. But huge opportunity for those lads. And not even the very new lads, the likes of Bugler, the likes of Lahiff, the likes of Sean McMahon, fellas, the likes of Robbie McDade, who seems to have, he was waiting a long time for his chance, and he got it in 2020 and he did very well. We haven't seen as much of him since.
Came on the last day, I think.
He came on the last day, but he hasn't driven on. So there's a cohort of players there that are very new, but there's also a cohort that have been there and have all Ireland medals. And, maybe it's time for them to start stepping up.
Just realised I was slamming the use of leadership phrases and stuff while talking to a principal who has a book called Leader on the bookshelf behind him as we're talking. So that mightn't have been the best move by me. Rory, we'll move on to the game that's on RTÉ2 on Saturday night. Mayo have named their team, and he's going for it anyway. Pádraig Ó Tuama, Lee Keegan, Stephen Cohen. Aidan O'Shea gets his first start of the year. So I just, not because it's on the TV and we have to sell it. This is, you don't have to sell Kerry and Mayo games. Conor Neville wrote a nice piece on the RTÉ website yesterday where he pretty much said the smell of want of these two teams because of the void left by Dublin is, it can be smelled from a million miles away at the moment.
It's really one to savor. You just hope that it's not spoiled by the weather, because look, the reality is the game has been played in Tralee, which it's on the western seaboard. The forecast for the weekend isn't great, but aside from that, it's just such a big game to look forward to. I think it could be the first of three. It might be. You could be looking at another meeting potentially in a league final, because I would suggest they're probably the two best teams around at the minute, and then obviously they're on opposite sides of the draw in terms of the All-Irelands if they both come through their provinces. I think for Kerry it probably means a little bit more, and I think that Kerry have kind of nailed their colours to the mast pretty much from the get-go in terms of team selection. They're putting out very strong sides every week as well. And I think that's a smart move as well by Jack O'Connor. Look, the reality is, and we all know this, they're going to hose their way through Munster. So they probably need to tune up as much as they can against Division 1 opposition while they get the opportunity and while the chance is there. And I think that's what makes it so intriguing. Mayo will probably be going down likewise. They stuttered and spluttered a little bit in the first game and were probably lucky to get away with a point, but they've really hit their straps since. So I think in terms of form lines as a game, and effectively then you'll have two more, you couldn't have asked for a better match this weekend to look forward to. And the fact that it's live on RT, I think it's fantastic. It should get a massive audience, and it's one I think we're all looking forward to.
Yeah, Cahair, there's half a rainforest has probably been downed by the newsprint spent talking about what to do with Aidan O'Shea. And we were only talking here the other week that actually maybe impact sub is the perfect role for him, but he's starting at centre half forward according to the team name this morning. So I don't know whether he's obviously, one of their leaders. So you have to give him a start every now and again, but it'll be interesting to see how he goes, whether he has 70 minutes in him. And especially against a team like Kerry, who will obviously target him as they always have done, as any team does, because of the kind of totem role he has in the Mayo team.
To be fair, and I'm an enormous fan of James Horns and the job that he's done in Mayo, but I think it's maybe one of the few things that he hasn't got right is the use of Aidan O'Shea over the last few years, and particularly nearly getting sucked back into the idea that he could play at full forward in the bigger games, and he's always put thrown out at full forward in the bigger games. I was surprised that their use of him in the All-Ireland final last year in the way that they used him that day. But look, the way that Mayo are at the minute is the other side of what James Horn has done. The depth that he has created since he has come back, and he did it the first time he was there. I think his first season in charge for the National League, I think it was an average of 5 or 6 changes a game every week he made to his team. And what he's done is he's built a depth where fellas, every county manager will turn around and say, well, we've used 33 players in the league, but those 33, how many did you give a minute at the end of the game? You just look at the basics. Like Kerry's bench, 288 minutes they've given the subs this year. Like Mayo have given almost twice that to subs. And that is a basic principle of what James Horn has done over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that has really stood to them in the latter stages of the All-Ireland, where teams look at them and say, I don't know about Mayo's bench and are there game changers there, but what they probably have is something very close to the level of what's on the pitch in a lot of areas. And that, I think that has really, really stood to them. And I think it'll stand to them again this year based on what he's doing in the early part of the season.
That's very interesting, Eamonn, because it's actually something we discussed in the hurling podcast on Monday, was that Waterford now seem to have, you'd argue, the best 20 players in the country because of injury over the last few years. They've had to kind of, they've had to throw lads in the deep end, and now that the injured players are all back, and they now actually have this kind of grizzled, kind of seasoned squad, which is kind of they had no choice in doing it, but James Horan had a choice, and this is the route he has taken over the last couple of years. He kind of came in and he did, like, it was marked how many players he used in his first season, etc. Jack O'Connor has gone a different route, and he's probably gone the route that the Mayo or the Kerry County Board want him to go. You could argue they brought Jack O'Connor back because this is what he does. He picks his strongest team, he plays it, he tries to win the league, he tries to win the All Ireland, and he not to play down what he does. Obviously, he's a fantastic manager, but he probably doesn't overthink it either. And he's not looking to build a dynasty. He's looking to win an All Ireland. Would that be a fair kind of way looking at it?
And I think, look, even going back to the last year that I was involved in, 2018, Mikey, there's been a lot of the younger players have been brought through in the last 3 or 4 years, so they have a good bit of experience. So again, I think some players are still out injured, and fellas have been coming and going, and it's necessitated picking those strong teams. But you're right. Look, Jack is going to pick the strongest team possible available to him for every game, and at the same time, he is developing players. He's added the likes of Dan O'Donoghue this year to the options, and some of the other players. I'm sure, particularly if they were to get a result tomorrow night in the last 2 games, he'd probably have a look at even more players. But I think from Kerry's perspective, this weekend is a fantastic game. I think if you're within the squad, if you're Jack or you're within that squad, you'd be excited about the challenge this weekend, because the game so far, there's been a small bit of an asterisk beside them, in that the didn't play well in the second half of the Kildare game, got the point out of it. Dublin are obviously a bit Trinacala at the moment. Donegal didn't really perform when they came to Killarney. Monaghan, I would have expected a small bit more away from for Kerry away from home, but Kerry played very well against Monaghan. So there's been good wins, but I think this is going to be the biggest test of the league so far for them, and it'll be a great kind of test for the group, as in exactly where are we now. And like I said, if they're to win on Saturday evening, then they're in a great position for the rest of the league, and you possibly will see a bit more experimentation after that. And the other thing, probably from the practical point of view, is that it's harder for the fellas on the outside that aren't starting to stake a claim when you're only training maybe once a week in the middle of the week when the games are coming so thick and fast. So there's probably an element to that as well.
Yeah. What would be your starting 6 forwards, Eamonn? I'm curious, because it's, there's always been abundance riches, but obviously kind of Tony Brosnan finally making the leap that some people might have expected for a few years from club to intercounty has added into the mix, and there's kind of the balance to be struck in the half forward line, to be helping out in defence. But the temptation when you're Kerry manager is just throw in, 6 scorers and see how you get on, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question now, Mikey. I think, like you could go, maybe depending on the opposition, you could go with a very offensive 6. But if you're talking about balance, you're going to be starting Johnny Shea centre forward. You're going to have David Clifford in the inside line. I think I like Paddy Clifford playing in the inside line and coming out from there. He's going to start. Paul Gainey's going to start.
Darren Moynihan seems to be starting a lot of games as well, Eamonn, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think you'd have Darren Moynihan / Micheál Byrne starting in one wing forward position. They're both similar type players. They're a scoring threat, but they'll also work very hard for you, and they'll win breaking ball. And then the other side, I think at the moment, going on form so far this year, Adrian Spillane is the one that deserves to start there, from the point of view that he brings that balance again. But also you then have the likes of Stephen O'Brien that can play there as well, and Stephen has had a few injuries during the league and he isn't fully back yet. He can play that role as well. So against a particular opposition, if you're really going for it, maybe you could have the likes of a Stephen wing forward if you want a working wing forward, possibly against the likes of Mayo, for example, where they're going to be the likes of Paddy Durkin in the half forward line going the other way. You're going to need fellas who are going to be able to get back the field. Adrian Spillane could be good at that, but look, they have, that's not even mentioning the likes of Tony Brosnan, the likes of Jack Savage that have done well so far. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few more as well. So when you put them all into the mix, they're going to have, if they can keep everyone fit, they're going to have 10 to 12 serious forwards up there. And
Jack doesn't have to worry about the bench too much, really, does he?
No.
Rory, the other thing, and we've spoken about it with Eamonn here before, and kind of you said a work in progress, Eamonn, and they've had 2 weeks now, so we might be expecting Rory something a little bit more thought out from perhaps the Kerry kick-out strategy, starting with who the goalkeeper is, I suppose, is the number one question there.
He has tended to favour Shane Ryan for the last couple of games, and I think he's done well. I think he's helped because it looks to me that they've settled on a consistent midfield with Jack Barry and Diarmuid O'Connor, and I think Diarmuid O'Connor's form has been a big boost. Yeah, especially in the continued absence of David Moran, which you would imagine we will probably see at some point over the next few weeks, maybe ahead of championship. So yeah, I think he I think from Kerry perspective, I think that's the big question. They've obviously the very first game, I think they struggled at midfield. They tried Sean O'Shea and tried, I think, Adrian Spillane against Kildare, and obviously I think Diarmuid was still tied up with the club at that point, and since he's come back, I think he's made a big difference. It gives them much better options in terms of what you don't want is to give Kerry the ball, so when you do have to push up, if they're going long, he's well able. So I think from that point of view, I think they're in a good shape. The only thing is, again, which is what makes Saturday so intriguing, is they're going the farm, you could probably argue, is Matthew Ruan the farm midfielder in the country? Maybe, I don't know. He possibly is. So they're going to get a really, really good test again in that department on Saturday night. And it's going to be interesting to see, because that has been, I suppose, a little bit of an issue for Kerry over the last while.
Yeah. Listen, look, we could talk about
Donegal as well, Mikey. Killian Spillane as well.
Yeah, you have to mention. You'll be hearing about that. He has that power, does he? No better mention. Now, look, we could talk about our man Kildare and Donegal Monaghan as well, but I don't want to spend the whole time talking about Division 1, and I'm conscious we have a Derry man in our midst, and they are playing arguably their biggest test thus far of the league, away to Roscommon, Cahair. But I want to bring you back first. I want to know what your initial reaction was when Rory Gallagher got the job.
Well, the reaction within Derry was a wee bit sceptical, to be fair. You go back to the very start. There was a vote among clubs as to whether it would go through, and it was a narrow enough vote in Rory's favour. Now, I would say if there was a vote tonight, he would get about 105% of the vote, because the job that he has done. And to be fair, I suppose people were looking at it at that time. Derry didn't look like any great shakes. They were looking at the basis of what he had done in Fermanagh and how he had done it, and people were a wee bit scared of the path that Derry might go down. And I think there's a wee bit of an element out there still that still says, I actually saw something the other day about Derry not having conceded a goal in the league, and that, Rory ball. And, you watch Derry, they could not be playing any more different than Fermanagh played under Rory Gallagher. They attack every opposition kicker. They squeeze the life out of it. Oran Lynch, the goalkeeper, goes and plays in midfield. It is, and what they're doing is I think they certainly did before last weekend. They still have the best defensive record in the country. But what they're doing is they're defending by dominating the game. They're controlling the ball in the way that Eamonn, said about Dublin, and building momentum against them. Derry have become a team to build momentum against, because sort of the return of Conor Glass at midfield, Emmett Bradley alongside him, the form of Kieran McFall, Gareth McKinless, finally becoming the inter-county player that was always in him. All of those things combined, and Shane McGuigan's progression as well. Derry are in a place where they can dominate these teams in Division 2. And, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that would have been unthinkable. They're not that long climbing their way to Division 4 at the end of the day. So, and a lot of it's down to Rory. That's the bottom line of it. He's put a belief in them. He has talked the team up from day one. You find managers, Kerry, Jack O'Connor, trying to play down. You bid somebody with 20 points. Sure, look, if the goal's gone in at the other end, you don't know. And whereas Rory has gone the other way.
Peter Keane, we got 6 lucky goals.
Exactly. Whereas with the Rory has talked the team up from day one. tried to put public confidence in them, tried to put confidence in them in everything that he's done, and I think it's shown. And now look, they have the two biggest games that they have had for a long time. They've Roscommon this weekend, they've Galway next weekend, and you know, certainly 3 points would be enough, I think, out of those two games. Even if they won one and lost one, they still might have enough. So they're in a very, very good position.
Yeah, sure. Look, even if somehow not the wheels fell off, but like those two results could, you know, go against them, and they wind up in Division 2 again next year. I don't think it's the end of the world, and I think they'd still be going into the Ulster Championship with a lot of confidence. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was, one thing he's kind of credited with is this notion that he's brought the clans together. He kind of stopped the warring between Derry clubs. Is that exaggerated? The impact that kind of the internecine kind of rivalry has in Derry?
Massively oversold, to be fair. Like in the sense that football has changed so much. There would have been that in the early 90s when, you know, football was so physical and violent, basically, some of the time, you know, when the rivalries between particularly Lavey and the Given and the big players that they had on the county team, they boxed the heads of other club games, and that was the way it was, you know. Infighting, rivalry, like there's rivalry in every county. They're big. There's an enormous club scene in Derry. There's an enormous interest in the club scene in Derry. More so, to be fair, than the county scene a lot of the time. There are bigger crowds at club games, but it's not a warring thing. They don't go to Owen Bay to hate each other. It was literally getting fellas to commit to the idea that there was success here with Derry, that you didn't have to play for your club in order to win something, in order to be successful playing football. And that's where the mindset was at in Derry for so long, that, you know, our top clubs, look at how successful they've been in the Ulster club and to some degree in the All-Ireland club for the size and the scale of a county like Derry. So a lot of the time it was seen that success was more viable with the club, and so fellas maybe opted away from county, and it became this thing that, you know, there was war among the clubs and everybody hated each other, and like it's just not true. Like it's just not there, and that's, yeah. But look, that'll follow Derry about to doomsday, really, like, because people will see the strength of the clubs and put two and two together.
Yeah. And when you look at, like, Rory Gallagher he's worked the Oracle in some ways, but then when you actually kind of look at the team sheet that Derry have, you're kind of thinking, like, that they're in Division 2 is a surprise. That they ever wound up in Division 4 is ridiculous. Like, just, I know some of those players are recent additions, and like Conor Glass has come back, but like, you know, Brendan Rodgers, Chrissy McCaig, Emma Bradley, Shane McGuigan, like, these guys are, you know, the phrase is overused. They get on pretty much any county team in Ireland without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, they're excellent, and I've been a fan for some time. I think, look, always the culture in Derry, going back to when I was playing myself, was to kick the ball, to play that attacking type of football. When the Bradleys up in the forwards, going back then, they were a great team. They were getting to league finals. They probably didn't fulfill their potential maybe at that time, but they were a damn good team. And I think we're getting back to that again now with the current group. Rory Gallagher deserves a lot of credit. And I think the interesting thing about them is that if they manage to get promoted up to Division 1, you know, first of all, I suppose to take a second and a beat to say it's unbelievable that they're in the top of Division 2 after coming from Division 3. You know, it's a great achievement that they've continued with their momentum and they're keeping going. But if they do get up to Division 1, I think oftentimes when a team comes up initially, and when it's the first go for them, and when it's the first go for the management team, they can get found out tactically at the very top of the game. Whereas with Rory Gallagher, he's huge experience. He's huge Division 1 experience already. So if he manages to get them up there, he'll keep them there with that quality of player that he has in his squad, with the way that they're playing, and with the experience he has himself. I would expect them absolutely to get into Division 1, and I would expect them to be an item in Division 1 again next year if they can keep all the players and they can keep going as they are.
They've been getting a lot of media coverage, Rory, for a lot of reasons. I think there's kind of a nostalgia element. There's the club thing that Cahair has poo-pooed there for us, thankfully. So the team they're playing this weekend away don't get as many headlines anymore. There's the Yo yo-yo West Brom Norwich quality to Roscommon that perhaps makes them, when it comes to the league, something of a non-entity in a lot of people's minds. But yet again, they're doing incredibly well. Made light of the number of club players they were missing for the first round or two. They've come back and they're putting up good scores, and they have a very wily manager. So this is a proper test for Derry.
Yeah, it probably cuts both ways. It'll be equally a good test. You talked for Roscommon. You talked about media coverage. We're actually on League Sunday. On Sunday, we're going to start with Division 2, and we're going to start with this game. A couple of cameras going down there, so looking forward to this one as well. I think it's going to be very interesting.
Cue a 6-5 rain impacted Dower match.
The one good thing, in fairness, they've done a fantastic job in the Hyde. The pitch is one of the best in the country nowadays. Sand based it there recently. They had it shut there for a while, so even if the weather is poor, it should still make for a good game. And they have and I think, look, it'll be a good test for Roscommon, good test for Derry. I think it's very interesting tie. Cahair mentioned there in relation to Derry and the paltry number of scores. They haven't conceded a goal yet. Is that right, Cahair? They haven't conceded a goal yet. And it's 6 points, 7 points. Very, very tight at the back. You've got a full back line there. Rogers, McCaig, and is it Cassidy? Is the other guy? Or is it but superb full back line, as good as any that's out there, but he's dead right as in that, I've watched him a couple of times now. Yeah, they fall back and defend in numbers like most teams, but when they attack in big numbers as well. They're posting big scores, and I was expecting more closely fought contest in Ennis 2 weeks ago. For them to run out 9-point winners, I thought was a pretty big statement. Was it 213-10, wasn't it? I think so. Was that 9?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So to my mind, given that Clare, had gone up to Roscommon and gotten a draw 9 points apiece, I was thinking, look, there might be a bit of a, this could, but to come all the ways down into Ennis, where we know Clare can be tricky, and they really put them away, really professional job, and I think this. You wouldn't be surprised if Derry were to do something similar this week. So it'll be, as I said, we're starting with it on League Sunday. And the main reason being is I think it's, obviously if the Dubs get relegated, all bets go off. But I think in a lot of ways, it's nearly the most interesting match of the whole weekend.
We'll finish with Division 3. Here we have you on, and
we should mention there's two former greats duking it out in Navan to try and save their Sam Maguire status.
Well, that's true. That relegation story's been going on since round 1, and we'll go on till round 7. It is true. We'll try and get Colin on Monday and torture him if we lose. But I wanted to finish up, just mention Division 3, because Kerry, you wrote a very nice column about Sean Quigley, who did one of his, every now and again Sean Quigley just comes along and says, you know what, today I'm going to walk on water and shoot the lights out and remind everybody that there's probably not a more talented footballer in the country when I'm in the mood. Fermanagh were probably a team not many people were thinking about, and the caveat here is Division 3, bar Wicklow, you could throw a tea towel over the 7 teams. But they're home to Louth this weekend, win that, and if Sean Quigley's in the mood, you'd bet on them. So they're coming quietly and could be in the Sam Maguire mix, which is a good or a bad thing. It's hard to know with some teams whether they might be better off in the Tailteann, but that's an argument for another day.
Sean Quigley was just, as I said, I sort of wish there were cameras there to show how good he had been on Saturday. But what he scored 1-5, was it 1-3 from play, but it was the vision and the passing, and there's just a real all-round class performance, and he's trimmed down so much. He's in such good shape, and it's great to see him. It's great to see him playing like that. And it's great.
He was lacking motivation for a few years, it's fair to say.
He did. He opted off the panel a couple of years ago, and then came back in. And I know, he'd been working very hard he worked very hard to be fair under Rory Gallagher, and got himself into decent shape, and then probably found it taxing, and the role that he played, you know, at times Rory had him playing one half back because of the way Fermanagh played, which, you know, probably to be fair, the chunk would be at all. And, but he's playing where he always wanted to play now. He's playing some stuff, and it's massive for Fermanagh because you say throw a blanket over the 6 or 7 teams there. Like Fermanagh and Laois at the weekend, you were looking at the winner potentially going up and the loser potentially going down. It was that big a game. But Fermanagh lost that game, totally different conversation you're having about them today. So they now have Louth at home, which is a big game. Obviously Mickey Hart will know Fermanagh very well. Very, very well. Probably more so than the other way around.
They got a bit of a trimming in their first game from Antrim. And they've kind of come storming back into it.
I spoke to Sean quickly after the game and speaking to him, and you know, when he said about that Antrim game, and you know, they missed 3 goal chances in the first half, and they maybe even taken one of them, that game maybe goes in a different direction completely. It got away from them in the second half, but as he said himself, like I think they drew Wicklow in the game after, and he said, you know, if we could get those 2 games again now, I think we'd fancy ourselves. You know, I think they're, whether it's mentally or physically or whatever it is, they're in a much better place. They're playing good football. They've not just Sean Quigley, Kieran Corrigan moved inside and, you know, tormented Laois at the weekend as well. I think he got 1-4 from play as well. So, you know, there's a wee bit of an air that they need top 16 football, they feel, for their progression. I suppose there's a lot of teams at the top end of that division would feel the same, but they want to be in the Sam Maguire. They've obviously Tyrone at home in the first round of the Ulster Championship, which is a big ask for them. But as Kieran Donnelly said after the game, you know, he couldn't recall or think of a time when Fermanagh had ever hosted the All-Ireland champions for a championship game. So, you know, they're looking at it from that point of view. It'll be a big day for them. They'll pack Bristol Park out and make it noisy and make it tight, but it's a big ask for them.
Yeah. Eamonn, you know, Division 3, you might like a lot of predictions beforehand were like, Westmeath and Laois, you know, they don't belong down there. There are, by my count, 5 Leinster teams in Division 3, and do you know what positions they fill? The bottom 5 positions at the moment. Now, look, it is, like I said, it's very tight. They're from 6 points to 3 points between 7 teams, with Wicklow on 1 point. Eamonn, but Division 3 has always been, and now the Tailteann Cup kind of element kind of just adds to it. It's a pig of a division to get out of.
It is, and I think we might have mentioned them the first day out. Limerick deserve a huge amount of credit for where they're at, and they're playing. Who are they playing this weekend? Westmeath, isn't it? Is it
Westmeath
yeah.
Saturday night, yep.
So that's a huge game now for Limerick, because if they manage to win that, they're in a great position to go up. Westmeath will be looking to bounce back after last weekend, and if they win it, they're right back in the mix as well. So yeah, that's the nature of Division 3. But again, I've been keeping an eye on Limerick, and I suppose just the fact that they're our near neighbours as well, and they've been going great guns. They'd one slip up, but they've reacted, and even the game they lost to Louth was a very tight game that could have gone either way. So they're going well, and I think they've scored the most goals in any division. Have they? I think they've scored 8 or 9 goals, maybe. I think they're the top of the goal scoring list. So they're going well, and a lot of credit to Billy Lee there, coming from where they've come from.
Yeah, it is
8 goals. Yeah,
8 goals. Yeah, and the game they lost was in a gale on a 4G pitch. So how much you could maybe put a little asterisk next to it. Don't tell Mickey Hart I said that.
And we still sure is that like Cahair might know. Cahair's good for the old stats. Did we ever find out, is that the only intercounty National League game that's ever been played on a fake pitch?
Got me with that one. I can't think of too many, given the sort of recent uprising of 4G pitches being used for matches. They've never really been used in matches for up until recent times. So I certainly have heard pre-season games, but I can't think of any National League games that have been played on.
We're going to have a dome in every province soon, lads, and there's going to be an awful lot of games played on 4G pitches, seeing as there's so many games in February and March.
Good luck to the ups and groins.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a dome in Tralee, Mikey, before there was a dome anywhere else.
Have you ever played football in David?
No, there was other sports going on inside that.
I'd say that. All right, lads, we'll leave it at that, and we'll be back on Monday anyway to review the matches and see where we're at in these very intriguing divisions. So thank you to Cahair, thank you to Eamonn, and thank you to Rory, and we will catch you all next week. Goodbye.
From this, how much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it.